a group of divers are exploring deep in an underwater cave, their lights cutting through the murky water, their hearts pounding. Suddenly, they spot something, scattered diving gear, rusted and tattered. They press on, and soon discover several skeletons still clad in their wetsuits. This is the unearthing of a long-buried cold case, hidden in one of America's most beautiful yet deadliest underground labyrinths. Hello everyone, welcome to another bone-chilling episode of Cave Diving Horror. Today, we're diving into the Jacob's Well incident, a story of overconfidence, disaster, and a cave that doesn't let go. Jacob's Well sits in a small stream in Wimberley, Texas, a stone's throw from Jacob's Village. From the surface, it looks harmless, an oval-shaped well, about 4 meters wide, 7 meters deep, glowing with that spooky, bright blue we all associate with hidden danger. But look closer. At the bottom, a pitch-black opening lurks. That's the real entrance to Jacob's Cave, the mouth of a monster that swallowed more than 20 lives. The water here stays a constant 23 degrees Celsius, perfect for swimming, perfect for cave diving, perfect for a death trap. The cave's known maximum depth, around 100 meters, and it's split into 5 deadly chambers. Chamber 1. The outer cave, where casual divers play, unaware of what lies below. Chamber 2. 7 to 50 meters underground, narrow, twisting, crisscrossed with stalactites, stalagmites, and sedimentary rock. Get lost here, and you'll never find your way out. Chamber 3. 50 to 75 meters down. The slope eases, but the current? It's a killer, especially after rain, when it turns into a lethal, churning stream that can sweep you away in seconds. Chambers 4 and 5, even worse. Chamber 4, 75 to 90 meters down, is wider, but getting there is a nightmare. The only way in is through a narrow passage connecting it to Chamber 3, known as the Horseshoe. It's often blocked by loose rock. Most of the deaths here? They happen right in that horseshoe. Get past it, and you reach Chamber 5. There's more beyond that. Clues hidden in the dark, telling us it extends further still, but no one has ever explored further. From Chamber 2 onward, there's zero natural light, just darkness and silt, tons of it, and kicking it up will drop visibility to 0 in seconds. Jacob's Well isn't just a swimming spot, it's a graveyard with a pretty face. On September 9, 1979, a group of divers heads to Jacob's Well, ready to push their limits. 2 men stood out, Kent Morping and Mark Brashear. They were friends and neighbors, and both thought they were experienced divers. Their goal? The Horseshoe Passage, the gateway to Chamber 4, a chamber no one had ever explored. No one even knew Chamber 5 existed. The problem? Their experience was only in open water diving. They had zero formal cave diving training. But they dabbled in cave diving before, so they didn't think anything could go wrong. Unfortunately, that overconfidence would cost them their lives. To make matters even worse, they had no proper cave diving gear. No guideline, no backup lights, no redundant breathing system. They truly had nothing to protect them as they dived into a death trap, blind and unarmed. They made a plan with their support diver, meet back at a certain time or something's wrong. Then, Kent, Mark, and their dive buddy George jumped in. They descended from the well's center, following a guideline left by other divers, past the open water into Chamber 2. But something was off. The current was stronger than usual, likely from recent heavy rains. They pushed on to Chamber 3. The slope eased, but the visibility was completely gone. Their movements, combined with the strong current, had kicked up all the silt. They couldn't see the guideline anymore. They were lost. But Kent and Mark, they kept going, toward the Horseshoe. In zero visibility, with no guideline, no backup lights, and less than half a tank of air, they had no business going any further. George, their buddy, watched in horror as they dragged their tanks into the Horseshoe. He banged his tank, flashed his light, begged them to stop. No response. Kent and Mark vanished into the darkness. George's air was running low. He couldn't follow, so he left his backup light at the entrance, a beacon for them if they ever found their way out. Then he surfaced and broke the news. Everyone knew Kent and Mark were gone. They called the police, and the police called the best cave diver in the state, Donald Dibble. Donald was a former Navy diver, a P-80 master instructor, the highest certification you can get. He assembled a team, rushed to Jacob's Well, and sent 2 divers down to assess the situation. Their report revealed that the horseshoe was completely blocked by rubble. They tried to dig it out, but for every rock they removed, 2 more slid in to take its place. Donald had seen enough. He was going down himself, accompanied by Calvin Turner, a game warden. First, they checked the ceiling of Chamber 3, no sign of Kent or Mark. Then Donald squeezed into the horseshoe, clinging to the guideline, feeling his way through the darkness for the bodies. Then, disaster struck. A surge of water, loaded with sand and rock, came rushing out of the passage. Donald's world went black. He couldn't see a thing. Worse, he was stuck. Wedged in the narrow passage, unable to turn around, unable to signal Calvin. He struggled, panic setting in, his breathing quickened, his air tank draining fast. Donald knew he was going to die, and as a diving instructor, he knew how painful drowning was. Slow, suffocating, terrifying. He found himself thinking, how do I make this faster? Gulp water? Breathe it through his nose? He chose to gulp. Nose breathing would make him choke, panic, thrash. He didn't want to die like that. Not for his wife, who'd have to identify his body. He wanted to go out with some dignity. So he took deep breaths, filling his stomach with air, speeding up the process. When his regulator ran dry, he pulled off his mask and started gulping water. But it wasn't like he imagined. Dizziness hit first, then searing pain in his stomach. He realized too late, there's no easy way to drown. Despair crashed over him. He regretted taking the job, regretted leaving his wife. Then, suddenly, something pulled him. A bright light blinded him. Something was forced into his mouth, and he could breathe again. It was Calvin who had seen the sand surge and realized something was wrong. He dived in, found Donald, and dragged him out, shoving his own regulator into his mouth. Donald was alive. When they pulled him out of the water, everyone gasped. His stomach was swollen, like he was 9 months pregnant, filled with air and water. He was rushed to the hospital, where doctors found his stomach had ruptured. Surgery saved his life, but the search for Kent and Mark? It was a lost cause. They brought in equipment to pump out the rubble, but it was useless. For every bit they removed, more slid in. A week later, the search was called off. With the family's permission, Kent and Mark were left in the cave forever. To prevent more deaths, they installed a reinforced concrete grill over the horseshoe entrance. But 6 months later, other divers tore it down. A plastic sign was left behind. "Don't you dare lock us out." That arrogance led to another tragedy 3 years later. But that's a story for another day. In 1984, during a detailed survey of Jacob's Well, divers found Kent's remains in a side chamber of Chamber 4. Mark was still missing, and in the process of recovering Kent's body, they discovered Chamber 5. The authorities installed another fence, this time at the entrance to Chamber 2. Years passed. Diving technology advanced. In 2000, an expedition returned to Jacob's Well. Deep in a side passage between Chambers 4 and 5, they found partial human remains. The gear confirmed it. It was Mark, missing for 21 years. The current had worn his body down to less than half, but the case was finally closed. But here's the kicker. They found another skeleton in Chamber 5. To this day, no one knows who it is. Jacob's Well has claimed at least 20 lives, maybe more. Kent and Mark's deaths were predictable. The sudden current, the silt, the zero visibility, those were the triggers. But the real cause? Arrogance, lack of training, ignoring the rules. No guideline, no backup lights, no redundant gear. They thought they were invincible. The cave proved them wrong, and their deaths changed cave diving forever, forcing divers to follow strict safety rules. Always carry a guideline, dive in pairs, never dive without backup gear. In caves like Jacob's Well, one mistake is all it takes. One wrong turn, one gulp of water, and you're gone. That's the end of today's video. Thanks so much for watching. If you ever find yourself staring into the bright blue waters of Jacob's Well, remember this: some beauty is meant to be admired from afar. Don't dive in, don't test the cave, because it's always hungry, always waiting for the next diver who thinks they're invincible. Until next time, stay safe, and never underestimate the power of nature.